you will hear Dr. Laurent and two students planning an academic poster. Dr. Laurent speaks first, Aoife speaks second, and Hugo speaks third.
Aoife and Hugo, your study of heat exposure around the university is strong, but the poster must communicate the argument in less than 2 minutes.
Our draft currently follows the report structure: background, methods, results, discussion, and conclusion.
It is accurate, although every section looks equally important.
That is the first issue. The background contains a paragraph on the history of urban climate research, but the audience mainly needs to understand the unresolved problem your study addresses.
I can remove the older historical examples.
Do that, but cutting text is not enough. Rewrite the background around the research gap. Campus planners know average city temperatures, yet they lack street-level evidence about where students experience the greatest afternoon heat.
So the background should establish the missing local evidence rather than summarize the whole field.
Exactly. 2 or 3 sentences can define the gap, the population, and the practical reason for the study.
Then our research question can appear immediately below it.
Yes, and use the same key terms in the title and conclusion.
What should be the main visual? I selected 4 photographs showing shaded and unshaded walkways.
The photographs are attractive, but they do not show the geographic pattern across all 12 measurement sites. I think the temperature map should become the central visual.
Explain why.
Viewers can see the hottest route, the cooler park edge, and the relationship between building density and heat in one image. The photographs could support 2 examples beside the map.
That would also reduce repetition because the current results table lists the same locations.
Agreed. Make the map large enough to read from about 1 meter away, and keep only 2 photographs as context.
I used red for hot locations and green for cooler locations because the contrast is familiar.
That combination creates an accessibility problem. Some viewers with color vision differences may not distinguish red from green, especially when the shades have similar brightness.
We could use blue and orange instead.
Better, but color should not carry the whole meaning. Add light and dark patterns or clearly labeled temperature bands, so the map remains understandable if printed without perfect color.
Good. Hugo has identified both the problem and a robust solution. Test the map in grayscale before sending it to print.
Where should we put the limitations? I placed them in a small box beneath the methods.
A separate limitations box is conventional, but viewers often skip it.
Our main limitation changes how the conclusion should be interpreted. We measured on only 3 clear summer days, so I would position that limitation beside the conclusion rather than far away under methods.
Then anyone reading the recommendation sees its boundary immediately.
I support that. Place the limitation next to the conclusion, and use cautious language about repeated seasonal measurement.
We still have detailed calibration notes and 3 supplementary tables. They will not fit without reducing the font.
Could we mention an appendix at the bottom?
A poster audience will not have the report appendix. I can create a QR code linking to a short page containing the full method, calibration record, and supplementary tables.
That is useful if the poster remains complete without the link. The QR code should provide depth, not hide information required to understand the result.
I will include a brief web address below it as a backup.
We should also check that the linked page works without a university login.
Good. Now let us confirm the production specifications in order.
The current title is 15 words, Mapping Afternoon Heat Exposure and Thermal Comfort Along Frequently Used Pedestrian Routes Across the University Campus.
15 words are difficult to scan from a distance.
Can you reduce it while preserving the population and measured issue?
What about campus pedestrian heat exposure along frequently used afternoon routes? That is 10 words, but it loses the mapping element.
Add mapping at the beginning and across campus at the end.
That becomes 12 words and retains the method, topic, route context, and location. Set 12 words as the maximum title length.
I will check the count carefully after changing any wording.
What exactly will the main map display?
It includes park areas, building density, route lines, and our measured temperatures.
The single measured variable represented by the color bands is surface temperature. The other features provide geographic context.
Label it clearly as surface temperature, not general heat, because you did not measure every aspect of thermal comfort at each point.
I will put the unit in the legend and explain the measurement time in the caption.
What statistic will the comparison graphs use?
I calculated the mean reading for each site.
The maximum might communicate the most dangerous exposure.
One unusually high reading could distort either measure, particularly with your small number of time points.
Then the median would provide a more stable site comparison while the range remains visible as thin bars.
Use the median for each site and explain the range in the caption.
That also keeps the graph consistent with the summary table in our revised report.
Which print size has the conference specified?
I designed the first layout at a 0 because the map looked impressive.
The conference boards are narrower than A0. A 2 would fit easily, but the text and legend would become too small.
The guidance permits portrait posters at A1. Use A1 with a minimum body text size that remains readable after printing.
I will resize the canvas before adjusting any individual element, so proportions remain consistent.
When is the digital proof due?
The print office offered Monday afternoon, but that leaves almost no time for final checks.
Wednesday morning would give us longer, although the conference delivery leaves the print team only one day.
Tuesday at noon balances both needs. We can review a PDF on Monday evening and send the checked proof Tuesday morning.
Tuesday is the deadline. Do not send a working file, export a PDF with embedded fonts, and verify every link.
I will prepare the map, accessible palette, QR code, and A1 layout.
I will rewrite the background, reduce the title to 12 words, calculate median values, and position the limitation beside the conclusion.
I will review the digital proof on Monday evening. Your final poster should lead the viewer from the research gap to one clear geographic finding, and then to a cautious practical recommendation.
You will hear a tutor and two students discussing a laboratory report. Dr. Mercer speaks first, Freya speaks second, and Camille speaks third.
Freya and Camille, I have read your report on how humidity affects the tensile strength of biodegradable packaging film. The experiment is promising, but several reporting decisions need revision.
We expected the methods section to need work because we divided the writing between us.
I was less certain about the introduction. It seemed concise compared with our earlier draft.
The length is reasonable. Your historical paragraph on petroleum-based packaging is only 4 lines, so that is not the main concern.
Is the prediction in the wrong place? We state it at the end of the introduction rather than under methods.
The prediction is exactly where readers expect it. The weakness is that you test samples at 40, 60, and 75% relative humidity without explaining why those levels were selected.
We chose 40% to represent dry indoor storage and 60% as a common warehouse condition.
75% represents a humid transport environment, but we left those practical links in our planning notes.
Add the justification to the introduction. Otherwise, the levels appear arbitrary, and readers cannot judge whether the experiment addresses realistic conditions.
We can support each level with the storage guidance we used when designing the study.
Good. Keep the history short and preserve the prediction, but explain the environmental range.
The fourth trial at 75% produced a much lower strength value than the other trials. We marked it as an outlier.
I thought the testing machine might have slipped because the curve dropped suddenly.
Did the machine record a grip error or interruption?
No.
The machine log shows a complete test, and the grips pass their daily check.
Then you cannot exclude the results simply because it is different. What does the sample preparation log show?
Trial 4 was cut from the same film sheet, but I wrote a warning beside it. We prepared it late because one sample had torn.
I remember replacing it immediately before testing.
That means it spent only about 2 hours in the humidity chamber, while the other samples were conditioned overnight.
There is your defensible reason. The sample did not follow the same preparation procedure. Exclude trial 4 because the conditioning step differed, not because its numerical result looks unusual.
We should report the exclusion and its reason rather than silently deleting the row.
Correct. Transparency allows another researcher to understand the decision.
I produced the main graph with humidity on the horizontal axis and tensile strength on the vertical axis.
The labels show 40, 60, and 75%, and the strength unit is megapascals.
The axes and category labels are correct. However, the graph displays only one average point at each condition.
Should I add the individual measurements as small dots?
That would help, but one essential feature is still absent. Add error bars to show the variation around each summary value.
Without them, the decline looks perfectly consistent even though some repeated trials differ substantially.
I can show the individual points lightly and place the error bars over the summary marker.
Good. Explain in the caption what the bars represent.
Our conclusion currently says that high humidity permanently damages biodegradable film.
Did you test whether the strength recovered after the samples returned to dry conditions?
No. We tested them immediately after humidity conditioning.
Then permanent damage is beyond our evidence.
Exactly. You also described the material as unsuitable for commercial packaging, but commercial suitability depends on sealing, shelf life, cost, and many other properties you did not test.
We need a conclusion limited to tensile strength under our laboratory conditions.
How about, the findings suggest that exposure to higher humidity reduces film strength under the conditions tested.
Use that. It reports the direction, remains cautious, and defines the boundary of the claim.
We can recommend a recovery experiment and longer exposure periods as future work.
Yes, but keep recommendations separate from demonstrated findings.
Who should rewrite the methods? I can combine our two versions tonight.
I kept the preparation log and recorded the chamber settings, so I can reconstruct the sequence more accurately.
Freya should lead the methods rewrite. Camille can check that every graph and table uses the same terminology.
I will also add the exclusion note and revise the results graph.
Now let us agree on a standard procedure so the revised methods are reproducible.
We conditioned most samples overnight, which was approximately 18 hours.
The pilot used 12 hours, while one article recommends 48 hours.
12 may not allow the material to stabilize, while 48 would double your schedule without evidence that it changes the result. Standardize the conditioning period at 24 hours for every sample.
24 hours also lets us begin each test at the same time on consecutive days.
I will update the workflow diagram from 18 to 24 hours.
Confirm the humidity settings.
We used 40, 60, and 75%. During planning, we considered 80% as the highest condition.
The chamber became unstable above 75% and fluctuated between 78 and 84.
Then 80% would not be a control condition with this equipment. Keep 75% as the highest setting and report the chamber tolerance.
40, 60, and 75% will remain the three categories.
What physical dimensions did you record before testing?
We measured length and width once using the cutting template.
Film thickness varies slightly across a sample, so we measured it near both ends and at the center.
State that thickness was measured at 3 points. That detail matters because tensile calculations use the cross-sectional area.
I will identify the instrument and its precision as well.
How did you combine the 3 thickness measurements?
The spreadsheet currently uses the mean.
A maximum value would prevent us from overstating strength, although it would ignore most measurements.
One reading is sometimes affected by a small fold at the film edge. With only 3 points, use the median value because it is less sensitive to one unusually high or low reading.
Median thickness for each sample, followed by the tensile calculation.
Correct. Do not confuse that with the summary statistic used across separate trials. Explain both decisions.
When do you need the revised report?
Thursday would allow early feedback, but that is unrealistic if you must redraw the graph and reconstruct the methods.
Could we submit Monday morning?
Monday leaves insufficient time for a second review before the assessment deadline. Submit the revised report on Friday by 5.
Friday gives me 2 evenings to rewrite methods and verify the 24-hour conditioning sequence.
I will finish the graph, error bars, exclusion note, and terminology check by Friday afternoon.
Good. The revision must explain why each condition was selected, distinguish procedural exclusion from numerical surprise, show variation, and keep conclusions within the evidence.
You will hear a tutor and 2 students discussing a course project. Dr. Hale speaks first, Myra speaks second, and Evan speaks third.
Myra and Evan, your food-sharing prototype has developed well, but the project report still treats every possible campus user as one audience.
We hoped the app could eventually serve students, staff, campus cafes, and people living near the university.
A broad audience makes the social benefit look stronger, although it has made our user journeys complicated. For the first tested version, narrow the audience to students living in university accommodation. They share collection locations, university accounts, and similar problems with surplus food at the end of each week.
Would that make the project seem less ambitious?
It makes the evaluation more credible. You can discuss later expansion, but the present evidence should concern one clearly defined group. Then we can remove the staff registration route and the public address form from the first prototype. Yes. State that the initial target group is students in residence halls, not every potential future user.
Our activity data show that many users open a food listing but do not complete a collection request.
The event log could tell us which screen they leave.
It tells us where they stop, but not why. Short interviews could reveal whether they worry about food safety, collection times, privacy, or contacting another student.
That distinction is important. Logs describe actions, interviews can explore reasons. We could select interviewees who abandoned the process at different stages.
Yes, and use neutral questions so we do not imply that one reason is expected.
Myra should draft that interview guide and link each question to a gap in the activity data. Our previous usability test involved 6 classmates. They completed every task quickly.
We could invite the same classmates after revising the screens and compare their times.
That would be misleading because they already know the navigation and remember what each icon is meant to do. The next test should use first-time users who have never seen the prototype. Correct. Familiar participants may overlook unclear labels because they understand your intentions.
We can recruit from 2 residence halls that were not involved in the design workshops.
I will prepare a short screening question to exclude anyone who has already tested the app. Good. Do not train participants before the test, give them a realistic goal and observe what they attempt.
One feature participants liked was the reward system. They earn points for listing food and collecting items before they expire.
The badges made the prototype feel active rather than purely functional. Rewards may increase activity, but what behavior are you trying to encourage?
We want more people to offer surplus food and complete collections.
A points system could distort genuine behavior. Users might list unnecessary items, divide one offer into several listings, or collect food they do not need simply to increase their score. Then our test would measure competition for points rather than whether the exchange solves a food waste problem. Exactly. Test the core exchange without rewards first. You can evaluate carefully designed incentives in a later study.
We should remove points, badges, and the public ranking together so no hidden reward remains.
Agreed. Describe that as a scope decision, not as proof that every incentive is harmful. The report also needs an accessibility section. At the moment, we mention color contrast in one sentence. Accessibility is broader than color. Have you checked screen reader labels, text resizing, keyboard navigation, and whether status is communicated without color alone?
Not systematically.
I will conduct the accessibility audit. I can test screen reader labels, enlarge text to 200%, check focus order, and compare every color-coded status with its written label. Good. Record the standard and tools you use rather than writing only that the design appears accessible.
I can revise the visual components after Evan documents each issue.
I will separate essential failures from improvements that can wait until a later release. We now have 5 main feedback points. Let us confirm the testing plan in sequence.
Do we remove only the public ranking, or all reward elements?
If badges remain, they still communicate achievement. Remove the complete points system before testing, including points, badges, and rankings. Keep the normal confirmation message after a successful exchange.
I will delete the points database field as well as the visible screens.
How many participants can you test properly? 5 is a common minimum for finding major usability problems.
We could recruit 12, which would provide more varied results across the 2 residence halls.
12 exceeds your available observation and interview time. Use 8 participants from each residence hall, with a mixture of previous food sharing experience. 8 gives us enough variation while allowing individual follow-up questions.
I will recruit 2 reserve participants in case of cancellations, but the planned test sample remains 8.
Which device will they use?
The usability laboratory has a laptop connected to recording software.
The project is designed mainly for mobile use. We could supply identical tablets to control screen size. Both choices create an artificial situation. Let participants test on their own phones, where they already have familiar accessibility settings, screen sizes, and connection conditions.
Device differences may make the data less tidy.
Record the model and screen size. Real variation is useful because your service must work beyond one laboratory device. We can use an external camera for hand movement without recording personal notifications on the phone. Obtain consent and ensure the camera frame excludes unrelated personal information.
What measures should appear in the results table?
I plan to count the number of taps required for each task.
We also have a short satisfaction rating after the test.
Keep both as supporting measures, but record task completion time for every scenario. Time can reveal hesitation even when a participant eventually succeeds. We should also mark whether the task was completed independently, completed with help, or not completed. Yes. Do not interpret a fast failure as better than a slow success.
I will create a structured observation sheet with time, completion status, taps, and notable comments.
When will the revised prototype be ready? Tuesday would allow us to test before the weekend.
Tuesday is too early for the accessibility audit and database changes. Friday would be safer.
Friday delays my feedback until the following week. Submit the revised prototype on Thursday by noon, including the test script and consent materials. I can finish the audit on Wednesday morning and verify the fixes that afternoon.
I will remove the point system, simplify registration, and prepare the 8-participant recruitment list by Thursday.
Good. The revised project will target residence hall students, combine activity evidence with interviews, test first-time users on their own phones, and measure completion time without reward-driven behavior.
You will hear 3 students solving problems with a group presentation. Saskia speaks first, Ewan speaks second, and Gabriel speaks third.
Thanks for meeting again. Our presentation on low-carbon urban transport is due next Thursday, but the rehearsal yesterday showed that the sections still do not fit together.
The most obvious problem was length. We spoke for 17 minutes even though the assessed presentation must be no longer than 12.
Length matters, but the argument was also difficult to follow. We moved from cycling in Copenhagen to buses in Curitiba and then back to local rail without explaining why those examples belonged together.
I think we fell behind earlier because responsibility was unclear. We divided the speaking roles, but nobody was specifically responsible for checking whether the evidence and transitions connected across sections.
My interview notes arrived late, which certainly did not help.
True, but that was one delayed task. The wider issue was ownership. Several tasks were written beside two names, so each person assumed the other would finish them.
Then our revised action plan should give every task one lead person and one reviewer.
Agreed. A reviewer can question their work, but the lead person remains responsible for delivering it.
Let us begin with the case studies. At present, we have 5: Copenhagen, Curitiba, Vienna, Manchester, and Seoul.
We could remove Seoul because the source we found focuses mainly on technology rather than passenger behavior.
That still leaves 4, and each example needs context, evidence, and evaluation. For will force us to describe them too quickly.
What if we retain Copenhagen for active travel, Curitiba for bus networks, and Vienna for integrated fares?
I wanted to keep Manchester because the audience will recognize it more easily.
Familiarity is useful, but the Manchester material duplicates the integrated ticketing point already demonstrated more clearly by Vienna.
So we reduce the case studies to 3 and use Manchester only as a brief comparison in the conclusion.
I can accept that. 3 gives us time to explain why each policy worked instead of listing cities.
Good. The selection also creates 3 distinct policy mechanisms rather than several overlapping examples.
The next problem is evidence. I found 2 more reports this morning, which brings our source list to 28.
That sounds strong, especially because both reports were published this year.
A recent date does not automatically make a source dependable. One of those reports is produced by a company selling transport software, and its survey method is not explained.
We still need enough statistics to make the presentation convincing.
Yes, but reliability matters more than quantity. 10 transparent sources are stronger than 28 items that we have not evaluated.
How should we evaluate them consistently? We currently have comments scattered through the reference manager.
Use the same checklist for every source: author expertise, publication purpose, method, sample, date, and whether another source supports the claim.
We could record a reliability score in our evidence spreadsheet.
A score might hide important weaknesses. Record yes, no, or unclear for every checklist item and add a short justification.
Then I will apply the checklist to policy reports. Gabriel can check the research papers, and Saskia can review the city statistics.
Fine. We should not discard a source merely because one answer is unclear, but we must avoid using it for a claim it cannot support.
Exactly. I will also verify every number that appears on a slide against the cited page, not just against our notes.
Another source of confusion is terminology. I say public transport use, Saskia says modal share, and Gabriel sometimes refers to mode shift.
I could put a definition in the notes below each slide.
That might produce 3 slightly different definitions. I suggest a shared glossary containing the term, our agreed meaning, and one example.
That would also help us distinguish modal share, which describes the proportion of journeys, from mode shift, which describes change over time.
All right. The glossary should be short enough to use during editing, not a separate research essay.
I will create it today and mark any term that still needs agreement.
Include accessibility terms too. We used inclusive design and universal access as if they were identical, but our sources define them differently.
Once we agree on the glossary, I will make the wording consistent across the slides.
We also need a clearer comparison. Yesterday, each city appeared in a separate section, so the audience had to remember details from several minutes earlier.
A final comparison table could show policy, cost, participation, and the main limitation for each city.
A table may contain too much text. I can produce a comparison chart with the 3 cities in columns and only the most important measures.
Could the chart include carbon reduction percentages?
Only if the figures are genuinely comparable. Some studies measure transport emissions while others measure emissions for the whole city.
I will make the chart and leave out any measure that uses incompatible definitions.
Send it to me before the rehearsal and I will check the figures and units.
I will edit the citation so the source is visible without filling the slide with reference text.
What about the rehearsal itself? We could ask 2 classmates from our transport seminar to listen.
That is convenient because they already understand the terminology and can comment on academic accuracy.
We need at least one person who does not know the project. Familiar classmates may follow a missing explanation because they have studied the same material.
Would students from the environmental economics group work?
Yes. They understand sustainability but have not seen our argument or case studies. Their questions will reveal where the logic is unclear.
We can invite 1 transport classmate to check accuracy and 2 environmental economics students to test clarity.
That gives us useful feedback from both informed and unfamiliar listeners.
Ask them to write the main conclusion immediately after the rehearsal. If their summaries differ, our central message is not clear enough.
We should also time each speaker separately. Yesterday, my section was nearly 7 minutes.
Mine was 5, and Gabriel's conclusion took about 3, so cutting only transitions will not be enough.
The next rehearsal must match the actual limit. We could aim for 15 minutes first and reduce it later.
That risks preserving material we eventually have to remove.
Agreed. The target should be 12 minutes now, including transitions, but excluding the question period.
Then assign 4 minutes to the policy framework, 6 minutes to the 3 cases and comparison, and 2 minutes to recommendations and conclusion.
I can shorten the framework by replacing the historical background with 1 sentence.
I will keep each case study to 1 policy, 1 result, and 1 limitation.
And I will make the conclusion synthesize the evidence instead of repeating every city.
Let us confirm deadlines. The final presentation file is due next Thursday at 4 p.m.
Could everyone upload revised slides by Tuesday evening? That leaves 2 days for rehearsal and corrections.
Tuesday is too early for the source checks and comparison chart. If we upload by Thursday morning, however, there will be no time to repair anything.
Wednesday at 6 p.m. would give Gabriel the day to verify evidence and still leave Thursday morning for 1 final review.
Wednesday works. I will upload the 3-case comparison chart and revised case slides by then.
I will finish the source checklist by Wednesday afternoon and flag any claim that needs removal before the upload.
I will complete the glossary and shortened framework today, then combine all revised slides on Wednesday evening.
Our rehearsal with the 3 listeners can be Friday at lunchtime, giving us several days to act on their feedback.
Good. We now have 3 case studies, a shared evidence checklist, 1 glossary, a 12-minute rehearsal target, and clear individual ownership.
That should solve the structure problem rather than simply making each person speak faster.
You will hear a tutor and 2 students reviewing a fieldwork proposal. Dr. Rowan speaks first, Noel speaks second, and Kieran speaks third.
Noel and Kieran, I have read your proposal about how riverside path design affects interaction between cyclists and pedestrians. There is useful preparation here, but the investigation needs a more coherent structure.
We thought the main weakness might be our sample. We currently plan to observe only 3 locations.
I was more concerned about the maps because 2 path width measurements came from an older council survey.
Both points need attention, but neither is the central weakness. Your activities are not yet clearly connected to the research question. You propose counting users, interviewing residents, photographing signs, measuring noise, and mapping vegetation, but you do not explain which part of the question each activity answers.
So the methods look like a collection of possible fieldwork techniques rather than one investigation.
Exactly. Begin with the variables in your question. What features of path design will you compare, and what evidence will indicate interaction or conflict?
For design, we could record path width, where the cycling and walking lanes are separated, visibility around bends, and the position of signs.
For interaction, we could record overtaking, sudden changes of direction, verbal warnings, and occasions when someone stops to avoid another user.
Better. Each observation category now serves a defined purpose. Noise measurements and vegetation maps can be removed unless you can justify a direct relationship.
Vegetation may affect visibility around bends, but we can record obstruction within the visibility category instead of mapping every tree.
And noise is not central to cyclist-pedestrian interaction, so we can exclude it completely.
Good. A narrower method will produce evidence you can analyze properly.
We selected the Old Mill Path, East Gate Promenade, and Harbour Walk because their designs are different.
The Old Mill has a narrow shared path, East Gate has painted lanes, and Harbour Walk has a physical divider.
Are all 3 accessible throughout your data collection week?
The Old Mill is near a bus stop, so transport is easy. However, the low section beside the bridge sometimes closes after heavy rain.
The forecast currently shows showers, but not a storm.
A site does not need to be closed every day to damage the comparison. If access is unreliable, you may collect fewer observations there or be forced to change location midway.
Then we should replace Old Mill. Riverside Market has a narrow shared path and remains above the flood level.
I avoided Riverside Market because construction work nearby creates considerable noise.
Noise would matter for recorded interviews, but your interviews can take place away from the machinery. It will not prevent structured observation of movement.
Riverside Market is also served by 2 bus routes. That makes it a more dependable replacement.
Agreed. We will remove Old Mill because heavy rain could make access unreliable, not because of distance or construction.
Before the full study, you need a pilot observation. Where could you conduct that without using one of the final comparison sites?
The visitor center path is convenient, and we could use the pilot to estimate the total number of users we are likely to see.
Eastgate might be better because its painted lanes resemble one of our design categories. We could compare weekday and weekend use there.
Estimating numbers may help scheduling, and weekday comparisons may become part of the main study. The essential purpose of the pilot, however, is to test whether your observation categories are clear and can be applied consistently.
For example, one observer might classify a cyclist ringing a bell as a warning, while another records it only if the pedestrian changes direction.
Precisely. Write operational definitions and test whether both of you code the same event in the same way.
The North Gate path has mixed users and several bends, so it should produce a range of interactions without duplicating a final site.
It is quieter near the entrance but busier beyond the cafe. We could observe from the central bench.
North Gate is suitable. Conduct the pilot there, compare your records, and revise categories where agreement is weak.
We hope to recruit additional observers because recording direction, interaction, and path conditions at once may be difficult.
The University Environmental Society offered 6 volunteers. Most have already studied sustainable transport.
Extra observers could help, but specialist knowledge introduces a risk. Volunteers who expect cycling to be environmentally beneficial may unconsciously underrecord cyclist behavior that inconveniences pedestrians.
We could avoid telling them our prediction.
You should avoid leading them, but existing knowledge may still influence what they notice, and how they classify an ambiguous event.
Their morning availability is actually good, and the sites are covered by local travel passes, so payment is not a serious issue.
Availability and cost are manageable. The concern is observer bias. Recruit from a wider student pool, and provide identical training based on the coding rules.
We could include 2 Environmental Society members but balance them with students from unrelated courses.
Yes, and test all observers during the pilot. Exclude data from anyone who cannot apply the categories reliably after training.
We also need ethics approval for the short interviews. We plan to ask path users why they chose a particular route and whether they felt safe.
Keep questions about their journey rather than collecting names, workplaces, or exact home addresses. They must receive information about the study and give consent before the interview begins.
I will prepare the participant information sheet and consent form. I will also create a verbal consent version in case someone does not want to handle a tablet.
Can we interview people under 18 if a parent is walking with them?
Not under this approval. Restrict recruitment to adults and make the criterion clear to every field worker.
I will add an age confirmation question before the consent statement.
My responsibility is the digital fieldwork map. It currently has separate layers for path width, lane markings, signs, benches, lighting, surface damage, vegetation, entrances, and observation points.
We could remove the numerical width measurements and keep only symbols for narrow, medium, and wide sections.
Measurements are relevant to the research question. Decorative detail is a greater concern because it may obscure observation locations.
Then I will simplify the map by reducing the number of layers. I will retain path width, separation type, visibility restrictions, entrances, and observation points.
Lighting and benches can appear on a background reference map if we need them later.
Yes, but they will not be active data layers. 5 visible layers should be readable on a tablet outdoors.
Include a clear legend and use patterns as well as colors so the map remains understandable for users with color vision differences.
We found a previous study reporting that wider paths had fewer recorded conflicts. Could we predict that widening a path will reduce conflict at our sites?
Be careful. A relationship between width and conflict does not show that width caused the difference. Wider paths may also have better visibility, fewer commercial entrances, or different user volumes.
So we can test whether the variables are associated, but we cannot claim that changing width alone would produce the result.
Correct. You may discuss plausible explanations, but distinguish evidence from interpretation, and avoid causal language that your design cannot support.
I will revise the hypothesis to say that conflict frequency is expected to be associated with path width and separation type.
For recording frequency, I suggested observations every 15 minutes so we capture changes during busy periods.
I preferred 20-minute intervals because they divide each hour into 3 equal blocks.
What does an interval represent in your plan? Are you observing continuously and summarizing at intervals, or recording only at a single moment?
We observe continuously, but each interval becomes one comparable block containing user totals, interaction counts, and conditions.
In that case, very short blocks may contain too few interactions and create excessive paperwork. Use 30-minute intervals, then note any unusual temporary event within the block.
2 blocks per hour will also align with the manual counters we use for pedestrian and cyclist totals.
We will record observations at 30-minute intervals and keep exact times for significant incidents.
Good. Finally, when will you submit the revised risk assessment?
We could send it on Tuesday after checking the weekend weather forecast.
The pilot is scheduled for Wednesday, so Tuesday leaves little time if the safety officer requests changes.
Submit it on Monday by midday. I will review it before Friday, and you can amend access, weather, lone working, and roadside hazards before the pilot.
Monday is manageable. I will complete the consent documents and add interview risks to the assessment.
I will provide the Northgate pilot map, emergency meeting point, and a revised 30-minute observation schedule.
Then the proposal will have a clear chain, a focused research question, justified sites, tested categories, balanced observers, ethical interviews, usable maps, cautious interpretation, and a workable safety plan.